The 7th generation 10.2 inch iPad was released in 2019 and was a minor upgrade from the 6th generation iPad, with the main difference being a slightly larger display. They even share the same processor. The 7th generation iPad can be picked up on eBay or from the Apple refurbished store for around £250, which is about £80 cheaper than buying the 8th generation iPad at retail price. This raises the question, should you go out and buy the 7th generation iPad, and how does it hold up in 2021? So if I'm being honest, I would recommend getting the 2020 8th generation iPad over the 2019 7th generation. This is due to the 7th generation iPad running on the A10 chip, which was released in 2016, whereas the 2020 iPad is running on the A12 chip, which was released in 2018. So for £80 extra, you're getting an iPad that, in theory, will receive 2 more years worth of software updates. The A10 chip isn't slow by any means. My only concern is that it won't last as long. But let's say that you don't want to spend the extra money, or you found a really good deal on the 7th generation iPad. Let's discuss how this holds up in 2021, starting with the design. The 7th generation iPad is the exact same design as the refreshed 8th generation model, which is a good thing. It definitely won't be looking outdated anytime soon. It has the curved back, which is a slightly different design language to the more premium iPads such as the Pro and the Air. This isn't a problem, it's still very comfortable to hold, although I do personally prefer the squared edges. It has fairly big bezels at the top and the bottom of the display, which isn't a bad thing. It gives you something to hold on to when watching movies or using it daily. And the bottom bezel is home to the Touch ID sensor, which is really quick and consistent, and I think is very good. So the 7th generation iPad has a large 10.2 inch display, and it does feel a lot bigger than the 9.7 inch display from the 6th generation iPad. This works with the 1st generation of Apple Pencil and the 1st generation only, and that does mean you'll have to charge it the dumb way by sticking it in the lightning port at the bottom of your iPad. This could actually be a good thing because there's a fairly large market for used 1st generation Apple Pencils, but anyway, they're still quite an expensive accessory, really. But the Apple Pencil is quite a useful tool for studies such as annotating and note-taking. So for watching Netflix and content consumption such as social media, this display does such a good job at it, and I really do think that this iPad is at its best when you're just chilling out, using it to watch a good film on Netflix. Finally, this iPad does have the smart connector, which opens you up to a few keyboard accessories from Apple, but this keyboard is about half the price of the iPad. So I don't know if I'd really recommend that, but there are some cheap third-party accessories out there which are quite decent. Moving on to performance, as I mentioned, this iPad is running a chip from 2016, which is actually the same processor as the iPhone 7. So at the moment, you won't notice it lacking performance. It runs very fast and feels very smooth. So switching through apps and app loading time is really impressive and quick. This iPad has an extra gigabyte of RAM than the iPhone 7, and the performance boost from this is noticeable when multitasking and switching between apps. You can also play games on this really well. Any game that you can find on the App Store will run very well, and you're also able to connect a controller to the iPad and play games like PUBG and Minecraft, and the iPad definitely won't be struggling with that. And productivity apps all work great, along with content consumption apps, so you can use your GoodNotes, Microsoft package, and your emails will all work really well on this iPad. This iPad is running the latest version of iPad OS, which is quite a big upgrade and allows for better multitasking, widgets, and a few more sort of computer-like features. iPad OS 14 can literally be a video on its own, so I recommend maybe going out and looking into iPad OS 14. So at the moment, the performance of this iPad is fantastic, and you'll be very happy with it if you buy it. The only issue that I have is that maybe in the future this performance won't hold up as well compared to the newer generation. Moving on to battery life. The battery life on this is just fantastic. You will easily be able to get through an entire day of university, a day of work, a day of watching movies sat on the sofa, a long flight, Whatever you throw at this, I'm sure the battery life will be fine. It lasts ages on standby, literally days, maybe even weeks if you were just to leave it completely. The battery life on this really is fantastic. There is a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera, which isn't anything special, but for video calls, FaceTime and that sort of stuff, it is good enough. But if you are taking selfies, you may notice that the quality isn't the best, but it's not the worst. And you're also able to record 720p video from the front-facing camera, which is more than acceptable. You could easily do a video interview or film yourself for a school project or whatever you need, and it's fine. So the main camera is an 8 megapixel camera that can also record 1080p video. The photos and videos from this look very similar to that of, let's say, an iPhone 6, which isn't too bad and again isn't amazing. I don't think it matters too much because it's an iPad, and hopefully you won't be taking this to concerts and stuff to use as your main camera. Please don't be that person. I have taken a few photos around the house and the garden, and yeah, they look fine. The video from this is actually quite decent. Apple do a good job at video. Essentially, these cameras are nothing special, but I think they're more than good enough for what you're going to need on a device like this. It's not very often that with an Apple device that's only 2 years old you need to think, is it worth buying? Usually the answer is always yes. But you do need to consider that the processor inside of this iPad is from 2016. If you found a crazy good used deal on this iPad and you're in the market to buy an iPad, then go ahead and get it. You won't be disappointed, and nor will you be feeling like it's slow. I only caution you about the fact that it may not last as long as the slightly newer iPad. I would personally consider the 2020 iPad for £329, which is basically the same apart from a processor improvement. I personally don't think that an iPad is in a position to be replacing a computer. I think what it's really best at is content consumption, watching YouTube, Netflix, scrolling through social media. It doesn't necessarily do as good of a job at creating things. It is really good for school and productivity tasks as well, and you may need to buy a keyboard accessory. The Apple one is quite expensive, but there are some third-party accessories. Having the support for the Apple Pencil means that it's kind of okay for content creation. Definitely not as good as an iPad Pro or MacBook, but it's kind of good for graphic designers. So for one awful reason, this is sold with 32 gigabytes of base storage. Really do take this into consideration before you buy. A few games, a few movies, and boom, your storage is full. So I would really highly recommend getting this with the 128 gigabytes of storage. I think this is quite naughty of Apple shipping an iPad with 32 gigabytes of storage, especially in 2019. It is literally just to get you to buy iCloud storage. So yeah, definitely take the storage into consideration before making any purchases, as it may come back to haunt you or just annoy you in the future. But this iPad really is great bang for your buck. You get such a good computer for your money, and I'm sure if you buy it you will be very happy with it, and it doesn't feel old and it feels very premium to use. If you enjoy these sort of videos and want to watch more tech themed stuff, please do subscribe, and I will be releasing that within the future. Thank you for watching.